Steps away from his children playing, Ash Rowell is murdered in cold blood. His wife, Leslie Rowell, is now at Houston PD headquarters sharing her husband's dying declaration.
He said, "They got me. I'm dead." I said, "No."
Did he mention anybody's name?
No.
Then Leslie shocks detectives, pointing the finger at her own family.
What does they mean to you?
They means Brian and Rick.
And Brian and Rick are?
My brothers, my older brothers.
Okay.
Leslie says there's a long, sordid history with her brothers, who are estranged from the family. Things used to be fine with Brian Lamb until he was fired by and then sued Ash and his mother, Charlotte Rowell.
And what makes you automatically think of Brian and Rick?
They threatened us in the past, and we've been afraid of them. They're just kind of thugs.
Ash's mother, Charlotte, reiterates her daughter-in-law's unwavering opinions.
I know who did it. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind.
And who did it?
Brian and Rick Lamb hired somebody to do it, I believe.
What's the reasoning why Brian and Rick are the first people to jump into your mind?
Because they'd already threatened to do this. I don't think they were stupid enough to come do it themselves.
Okay.
And our grandson, he heard his dad talking to someone at the door. And then he heard the shot. If Rick or Brian had been standing there, I believe Ash would have slammed the door and run for the back to protect his family.
Despite all that, this is no open and shut case. Cops begin looking at the Lamb brothers and many others. Detective Phil Waters, now retired, was one of the lead investigators.
Most homicides are either going to be, sex, drugs, or money. So this one could have been money. We never saw any indication that there was a drug paradigm.
Any evidence that Ash was cheating on Leslie?
Not that we found, no.
Well, who were the early suspects?
The early suspects were Brian Lamb, Rick Lamb. We looked at Leslie. We looked at Charlotte. We looked at the possibility of her husband, who had Alzheimer's, who's prior military, may have had an Alzheimer's episode of some kind.
Were you able to eliminate people and say, all right, no longer suspects in my book?
There have been a couple. Charlotte Rowell has been eliminated, and Rick Lamb.
So detectives are able to eliminate Charlotte and Leslie's brother, Rick Lamb, but only after Lamb was arrested for federal bank fraud and agreed to sit down and talk with investigators.
Well, did he give any useful information regarding Ash's murder?
He didn't really give us any viable information, but we were able, after the end of that conversation, to feel pretty comfortable that Rick had nothing to do with what had happened to Ash.
So what about his brother, Brian Lamb? According to Detective Waters, they requested an interview with him multiple times, but each time he declined.
No formal interview with Brian regarding Ash's murder?
No, none. But what was interesting was about a week after the murder, Brian had gone to a friend of his and had asked to borrow $10,000 for an attorney because Ash has been killed and they're going to come after me.
Maybe a good idea considering the threat Charlotte and Leslie told police Brian had already made.
It's like, "I'm going to get you.
Okay.
You're going to pay for this." That was Brian.
But this wasn't the first time the alleged threats have come up. In Brian Lamb's lawsuit against Ash and Charlotte, everyone has asked about them in their videotaped depositions. Sitting in the room off camera for Ash's is Brian Lamb.
Anybody specifically ever make a threat against you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Mr. Long.
Brian Long?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, if you get rid of me, bad things will happen to you and your business.
That doesn't sound like a physical threat. Or did you take it as a physical threat?
I took it as a physical threat.
Okay. Anything else?
My wife has received 2 text messages.
Okay. One of those was produced during Brian Lamb's deposition?
Yes.
And what, you remember the rough description in that?
I'm going to get your husband and his mom. They can't hide from me.
At one point, Ash stops the deposition, the tension palpable.
Excuse me, counselor. I think your client's videotaping me.
I doubt it. We're videotaping it right there.
Well, yeah, but that's his personal video camera. He's already threatened me 3 times today by motioning that he was going to cut my neck. I've been threatened before, and I feel that he might be taking video to send to someone else.
Ash then tells opposing counsel he was and still is afraid.
I felt threatened. I feared for the personal security of myself and my family, and I do to this day.
In Brian Lamb's deposition, this time Ash and Charlotte are sitting off camera.
Isn't it a fact that you threatened Mr. Ash Rowell and his family if you were terminated from the business?
No. Section 4.
Isn't it a fact that you said to Mr. Ash Rowell and Ms. Charlotte Rowell that bad things would happen to them if you were pushed out of the company?
Section 4.
Didn't you, in fact, ask your brother to intimidate the Rowells by sending them threatening messages?
No.
Didn't your brother send a threatening text message?
Calm down.
Didn't your brother send a threatening text message to your sister who is married to Mr. Ash Rowell?
No.
That didn't happen.
No.
You never heard that. No. This is the first time you ever heard that your brother, who was here earlier today.
It's the first time this morning I heard it, yeah.
What have you told your brother about this dispute?
That Ash and Charlotte stole my company. What else can I tell him?
At one point, Brian Lamb addresses his former colleagues and family members.
Look in your heart, Ash. You know it too. I hope you sleep good at night. You can stare at me too, Charlotte. Same thing goes to you. As a human being.
Let's go off the record here.
Yeah,
I think you need to get in control of your client. Let's go off the record.
Although Phil Waters is now retired and not officially working the case, he says besides Brian Lamb, there's one other person they haven't been able to fully clear.
What's interesting is that out of the people you said you were able to rule out as suspects, you didn't mention Leslie, the wife.
Right. Leslie was brought back again for an interview, and this time she wanted to bring her attorney, which is fine. I can tell you from that last interview that was given, which was, I want to say, probably 3 years ago, she had made no contact with us inquiring as to the status of this investigation. So that is troublesome to me as a detective.
Has Leslie taken a polygraph test?
We asked Charlotte and Leslie to take polygraph tests. Leslie said she would only take a polygraph test if Charlotte took it first. Charlotte has taken the test. Leslie has not. In my mind, it's a little strange.
Do you think Leslie had any part?
I hope not, Jason. I don't know. I think Leslie knows more.
Coming up, she hasn't spoken publicly in 5 years, but now Leslie Rowell is sitting down with Crime Watch Daily to tell her story for the first time.
He collapsed, literally in my arms.
And the one question that almost stomps the interview.
This is where I feel nervous. I called our son to go get help, and he ran up, and he had to see his father. But he was so brave.